Hi, all you gorgeous people. Today I'd like to talk about the healing powers of milk. And I'd like to tell a little bit about my own story with raw milk, and a bit about the story, the history, and also about how you can use raw milk if you wish to try and see if this would be a path for you to use raw milk as a diet for a while. So I grew up in Australia in the 60s, and I was just an ordinary child who had milk like everyone else. And it was I think it was just milk that my mum bought in the shops, and it would have been pasteurized, definitely, and probably also homogenized. And they know today that that is actually very, not just unhealthy, but actually quite dangerous milk to drink, but nobody knew anything about that then. So I grew up and got all these different health ailments, and one of them was eczema, which is quite typical when you can't tolerate milk. And I always had stomach ache, and I had lots of infections and had lots of penicillin. So that was a really good cocktail for a bad health. So when I was a young woman, I started reading about and learning about how milk is bad for you. So I started believing that you shouldn't have milk or any milk products, but I really loved cheese and especially butter. I love butter. Especially the Danish butter is so delicious. So I tried avoiding milk, and it did make some change, but not a great change at all. But then I also learned that if you're breastfeeding and you're having babies, you should not give them any milk while they're very young, because I'd had all these problems, and I'd learned that if you want to avoid these problems in your children, you shouldn't give them any milk products the first few years. So I did that with our first baby, and then when we had our other children, we had a cow ourselves, and we started having raw milk. But I didn't know much about raw milk then. But she didn't have all the health problems that I had, luckily, but she did have some. The first one, although I did avoid the milk. Then for a long time, I've just been trying to avoid milk, thinking that it was bad for me. And that it was very, your body became very toxic by it, and so on. And then just recently, not long ago, I started reading from America about raw milk, and it was just amazing to read, and it was so obvious when I thought about it, that human beings have been having this delicious food, the only whole food of the world. It's the only food that exists that man can live off alone, is cow's milk. So I started reading about it and thinking, oh, this is just amazing, and I've actually been lied to, like in so many other ways of our lives. We're actually taught things that aren't true. And the whole thing about milk being unhealthy, it depends on what type of milk it is, because raw milk is a live food. This is the morning milk, and it's been standing for a while, so it's got the cream up here, and this is the milk, and it is a live food. So it is completely different to pasteurized and homogenized milk, obviously, and it has a different effect on the body. So when I turned 50 a couple of years ago, and my husband gave me a cow for my birthday, and we hadn't had cows for a while, and I was just, I couldn't really understand it, because I wasn't right into the raw milk yet, and I knew that I still reacted a bit to milk, so I couldn't really understand why I was so joyful. I just felt that this felt so right for me to have a cow again, and so when I got her, I started having raw milk with all the knowledge I had gained, and I just started slowly having more and more raw milk. And I would make this milk coffee I've told you about, where you have a tiny bit of coffee and you have a warm milk, just lukewarm, like 38 degrees Celsius milk, and I would drink that with such pleasure. And within 3 weeks I put on about 10 kilos. I had been so underweight for 20 years. And it was just amazing. It just really, really changed my way of being, really. So I wouldn't say it's cured all my different things at all, but it definitely I can feel it's the right thing for me. So to live on mainly milk is the right thing for me for a while, maybe for the rest of my life, I don't know. So it's been really special, and that's why I'm telling you about this, that it has been really profound for me, and maybe there's some of you who feel, wow, this is something I should try. So let's look into the history, because what they say is that well, of course we know that cows have been a part of man's life for thousands of years, and the really highly developed civilizations, they actually came from areas where there were cows or goats, or there was milk, because it was a very, although you need the grass and the branches to feed them with, it's a very easily assimilated food. It goes into the system very easily, and you don't have to process it. You can just drink it, maybe make it into clabbered milk just by letting it stand and have it, and you're getting all these amazing nutrients. So people became very strong, and it was just really, really good for them. And we know about the Maasai people in Africa, who are some of the most beautiful people on this planet and very strong. They live off milk, mainly milk, and when there's not enough milk, they'll have blood. And apparently, according to these doctors who worked with raw milk and healing people with raw milk, milk and blood are very similar. So when you're drinking the raw milk, your body recognizes it very, very well. And because it's so similar to the blood that's flowing in our system, and because it's so living, it more or less sucks straight into the body. So your stomach has an enormous rest when you're just having milk, because it just does not have to work so hard. And that's what I felt very, very clearly, that it just sort of more or less just filled me up with nourishment. So anyway, Hippocrates told about raw milk, and it was mare's milk that can heal you. And in the 1920s, there were some American doctors who started actually curing people with raw milk, and they were inspired by Russian doctors who'd been using mare's milk. It's much more common in Russia with the mare's milk, but that's raw too, and that was often soured. So there's this book I've bought by Bernard McFadden. I'll just show it to you. And he was not a doctor, but he was a very unique man who was quite sick as a child, and who tried lots of natural ways to heal. And he reached the conclusion at the age of, I think he was in his 40s, that milk is the perfect food for man, and it builds the body, builds the muscle, it makes the body proportions beautiful, and gives you the layer of fat that you need, that is natural, and just heals you. So he healed many people in these sanitariums. Or he made this place where people could come and go on a raw milk diet. And there's another man, I think he was a doctor, called Porter, but there were several others who worked with raw milk. And the milk diet, where you actually have this disease, there were all sorts of people with heart disease and diabetes and I think tuberculosis, many different diseases, who were cured very quickly. And what they did was they drank raw milk, they sipped raw milk from a glass every half hour, 1 glass every half hour, and if all depending on your size. I tried the milk diet, the milk cure, for a month last November, and I wouldn't say I was miraculously healed in any way, but it was quite amazing to experience. And apart from drinking the milk, according to both of them, especially Porter, you're supposed to rest all the time, more or less. You just have to lie down drinking milk, and the only time you get up is to go to the toilet and to go to have a bath. You have a bath every day, at least once a day. So, and the fact that you have to rest is because you have to fill your body up with milk, and the milk, what it does is, they say that a person who is sick is malnourished and toxic. If you're not malnourished anymore and you're not toxic anymore, you're well. So, but obviously there's the whole mental and emotional side of a sickness, which we mustn't neglect at all, because it's always there. But that's what they say, that the milk nourishes all the cells. It's like when a person is sick, the cells are sort of shrunk, and when you have all this milk and you're resting, the cells fill up with all this nutrients, and the fats, especially in the milk, but also the minerals, they draw toxins out of the cells and pull them out of the body. So it's really amazing. If you ever want to try, they call it a milk fast, but I think you're not really fasting, but you're really, really resting your body amazingly. So this is really interesting. There's another book, The Untold Story of Milk, which has been around for quite a while, and where you hear the story of how cows used to be treated and milk used to be treated, which was natural, and how it's become such an industry, and how cows are treated so wrongly, and it's just really horrendous what's happening. And the milk that's coming out of that, of course, is very unhealthy. I mean, it's really, really bad for you. Just the milk itself from the unhealthy cow, and then they do all these things to the milk, which makes it very bad for us. So another book I have here, which I've mentioned before, Cure Toothache, is a book by Ramil Nigel, and is absolutely amazing. He's saved my teeth, definitely, and I hope I know he will save many other people's teeth. And he has a story here by a dentist. I'll just read it for you. The Town Without a Toothache. Hereford, Texas became known as the town without a toothache in 1942 due to the pioneering work of dentist George Hurd and author of Man vs. Toothache. Dr. Hurd explains the town's secret, and he says, after a newcomer has lived in Hereford a few years, provided he had drunk lots of raw whole milk, he develops resistance to tooth decay. Even the tooth cavities which he brings with him when he comes to Hereford will be glazed over if he has drunk raw milk. For years I made inquiry of my patients as to their milk habits. Almost invariably I found that the possessor of a mouthful of sound teeth had been a consistent milk drinker from early childhood. A surprisingly large number liked either buttermilk, clabber, or both. The significant fact is that the milk those patients drank came from the cows that had grazed on native grass in Deaf Smith County pastures. In winter, as a rule, the cows had grazed on green wheat. My fellow dentists heard me out of respectful attention. One dentist, Mr. Young, remarked, if all our patients adhered to Mr. Hurd's ideas, we would be minus patients. So it's just incredible that we haven't heard about this before. But anyway, now we've got this far, and I'll just tell you a little bit about how you can do this if you want to start living on milk. And as I said before, start slowly and sip your milk, and preferably never really cold, because the body just does not like cold things really, especially when you're healing. And the doctors here say that fruit and milk is good together. So if you feel like fruit, and I do during the day, I feel like something very fresh and a little bit sour, so I might make I have some strawberries here from the freezer from last summer, and I just take them up. You can see I've thawed them, and I put a bit of, I have kefir, which I make in big portions, and I might have 1 or 2 liters of kefir a day. I have probably 3 liters of milk a day now that I'm just living on milk, and I'm not on the actual milk cure where you're drinking it every half hour. I just have milk whenever I feel hungry. So I'll blend these together, the kefir and the strawberries, with a bit of stevia, which I know is not really great. If I could have honey, that would be better. I have a tiny bit of raw honey, but and when you have candida, you have to really watch sugars. So I use mainly stevia. And sometimes when I'm having my kefir in the morning, just a glass of kefir, I'll just cut up an apple, and I usually peel it because I just can't tolerate the fiber very well. But just eating an apple and having the kefir with it is really delicious. And then I have my coffee, so I'll warm this milk, and I have a tiny bit of coffee. And you can actually also make cocoa, which I had the other day, which is quite amazing. You make it with hot water, and you can use ordinary cocoa powder, just raw, not necessarily raw, because I think I haven't tried that, but just ordinary unsweetened cocoa powder, and a bit of stevia and maybe some vanilla, just raw, just a vanilla pod, and you boil it together, and then you make sort of a very thick, very sort of dark brown cocoa, and you can pour your warm milk onto maybe that much, so just have it as strong as you like it. And apparently cocoa is really good for you too, but you just sort of feel with your body how much you can have. Just a simple glass of raw milk that you just sip is so delicious, and it just feels so great in the body. And there's some disadvantages. Sometimes you can, especially from the kefir, you can have an unpleasant taste in your mouth when you've had the kefir, and I think that's part of the healing process. So what I do, I just chew some lemon peel that's from my water kefir, and that just gives a really nice taste in the mouth, and it just takes away that funny taste that you sometimes get. So that's one thing. And also you have to watch your stomach if you have tendency to constipation. But I use enemas a lot because I've been so unwell for so long. So just make sure that you're not constipated. And if you feel, that's what he says here, that some people, they just don't want fresh milk, they want the clabbered milk, which is even easier to digest and has a different effect on the body, and especially repopulates the gut very, very efficiently. So if you feel more sour milk, have that more in the beginning, and sort of slowly feel your way to how much of just the fresh milk you can have. So that's how I have my milk. And yes, I'll just say something about the cow. I don't think I said that before. Oh no, I'll just say some other things about the advantages. What's really, really great, I find, and it has really changed my life a lot, is that I've been cooking for so many years for our family, and it's been such a big part of my life, and I feel this is such a holiday that I don't have to cook anymore. My husband's very accepting and very lovely about it, and I can just go and feed myself so easily, and I'm having 100% raw food all the time, and it's so easy to digest. So you're never burping or sort of feeling upset in the stomach, because you're always just sort of having what you feel like, and when you feel content, you stop, and it's so simple. So it is very much like a holiday from lots of the chores, and it's very quick to wash up, although it is greasy and needs some soap. A lot of the things I can just rinse and just because it's so clean. So it is. There are many advantages, and I think if you had to buy the milk, it's still a very cheap food. So you don't have to have a cow to do this. So anyway, I just want to say something about the cow. The cow symbolizes the mother of the earth, and in many traditions, the cow is a very powerful and very important being. And I have this feeling that the cow is really a healer. That's also, well, in the Indian tradition, of course, the cow has a major part, and is really thought of or looked as holy and a healer of the land. So her manure actually heals the land, and her food, the food she gives us, heals us. And I think there's something really true about this. and you can feel it when you're with a cow. There's just something very healing about it. So this is also a tribute to the cow. But I hope this was informative for you, and if you feel that this is something that you like to try, go ahead, because it's an amazing experience. So see you next time. Bless you.